Bowl window coming to a close. I bring this up, Jack, because I one of my favorite things to do is to buy the annual magazines, whether it be Lindy's or Athlon's or whatever. And the reason I like these magazines, one, it's interesting. They print them ahead of time, several weeks ahead of time, but they also spend a lot of time. They know it's an annual, right? So they write an article, or they have somebody like yourself who's a good writer write an article or two at the front of the magazine. And a lot of those articles are freaking awesome. Really, really good stuff. Like they give the writers months to put these things together. They get great concepts, and sometimes there's some really good stuff. Sometimes you're getting some like scouts opinions. Sometimes you're getting some thoughts that maybe we just missed, or maybe a look at a different way to look at the draft, or a different way to look at quarterbacks or personnel or whatever. And so I usually buy them for those articles at the front. One of the articles in I think it was the Athlon annual, had teams whose Super Bowl window is closing. And so I'm like, oh, that'll be interesting. It's like the top 5 or top 10 teams whose Super Bowl window is closing. So I hadn't even read all the articles, but I'm like kind of thumbing through it. Number 1 on the list, 49ers. I found that very peculiar. Why? Because Trey Lance is a virtual baby. So is Brock Purdy. The quarterback is kind of a key spot. All the Niner quarterbacks are young and cheap and and the arrow's pointing up, you would think. Then I'm also looking at a roster where there was a ton of rookies last year. And, you look at the personnel, the Niners really but Trent Williams is the only guy I can really think of that's, maybe towards the twilight. And granted, he's a left tackle. It's a key cog in your team, but it's not like, oh my God, they lose Trent Williams if he decides to retire at the end of the year, disband the franchise and let's all move on. 49ers are still going to be one of the 3 or 4 favorites, my guess, even post Trent Williams. So I just would push back in a huge way on the 49ers window closing. I don't see it that way at all. I see the arrow pointing up on a lot of football players. And I see very few guys at the end. I don't know. Where are you on the 49ers Super Bowl window? Are they in the middle of it? Or are they at the end of it? To be the number 1 team whose Super Bowl window is closing, you would think that Tom Brady was their quarterback, or Aaron, they'd signed Aaron Rodgers. And, I'm not really getting that. How do you see it?
It's an interesting one. I get it if you want to say that, some of their top guys are retiring or, at the end of the road, but you hit on it. It's offensive guys, Trent Williams, George Kittle, Kyle Juszczyk. But beyond those 3, which of the key 49ers players are really near the end of the road? On defense, they're all young. They just drafted a guy to replace Tayshaun Gibson on the back end of that defense. Other than that, they have a ton of, their key pieces are all in place for a long period of time. And I would say the 49ers Super Bowl window is open as long as Kyle Shanahan is the head coach of the 49ers. Because the way that he's able to work this offense, even when some of these top guys are out, they still move the ball, they still put up points. And as long as they keep that defense intact, and it's, I would think that Kyle Shanahan can find a new left tackle. He's not going to be as good as Trent Williams, but one that's serviceable. I think he can find another fullback, to replace Kyle Juszczyk and all the things that he does. And I also think that, George Kittle is a very good tight end. Don't get me wrong with him, but I do think that if they need to, they can find a guy that can make the plays. They've won how many, they have played well. They have put up big numbers when George Kittle wasn't on the field. It's just part of the deal. And one of the main reasons that, they don't win when George Kittle's not on the field is usually because they don't have a quarterback playing very well.
And I will say this, the time goes by fast in the NFL. 1 year is not really like 1 year. 1 year in football is like 3 years in basketball, 3 or 4 years in baseball. Guys do get old quick. Guys' bodies fall apart, in a game. Your career can end at any moment. I know when I looked at the Niners with Willis and Bowman, I thought, you know what, this duo is going to be the inside linebacking combo on this team for the next 5 to 7 years. and like 2 years later, they were both out of the game. And so it can go fast. I'm not, ignorant to that fact. I just see the 49ers with the arrow pointing up on so many players. I just don't see them as a team that's window is closing. Shanahan's not old. Lynch is not old. There's several young, talented players. They got a full complement of draft picks. They're not leveraged. To me, they seem to be. I don't want to say they're right in the middle. They're definitely not early on their Super Bowl window, but I don't know that I would say they're at the end.